Spider-Man should not be called Spider-Man, and here's why. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Bug of the Week, brought to you by Lil Dudes Insect Academy. And this week, we are talking about one of my favorite orders ever, because they're just so weird and odd and unique, and I hope you guys enjoy them as much as I do. Before we get into it, of course, as always, leave a like and subscribe, and leave a comment about your favorite fact about these awesome bugs. But on this episode, through our journey through all of the insect orders, we have arrived at the Embioptera, also known as the Webspinners. Side note, if you're looking at any resources for Embioptera and it says Embioptera, it's the same thing. That's just another older name for them, but the more commonly agreed upon name now is Embioptera. So, Embioptera, the Webspinners. Let's talk about Embioptera as a word first. Embio meaning lively, and ptera, of course, meaning wing. Lively wings. So this actually segues into the morphology. So let's get that out of the way first. Embioptera comprises of about 380 species worldwide so far that we know of. And these insects range mostly in tropical and subtropical climates. So unfortunately, if you're like myself and you live in the northern United States, you likely will never see them. But they are in the southern states of the U.S. sometimes. There's a handful of species that go up into the southern U.S. So, as for the anatomy, these bugs look kind of boring, honestly. They kind of look like a dermapteran, like a earwig that we've talked about before. They kind of look like a termite. They also kind of look like the bugs that we talked about last episode, the Grilloblatodia. So these insects are kind of soft-bodied, sort of flattened insects with long bodies. So, starting off with the head, their mouthparts are mandibulate, biting, chewing, prognathous mouthparts, meaning that they point forward like an earwig's, as opposed to hypognathous mouthparts, which point downwards like a grasshopper's. Next up, their antennae are slender, long, and filiform, nothing crazy there, and they have 1 to 2 segmented cerci, being asymmetrical in males, which is kind of interesting, because asymmetry is super weird and unusual in the animal kingdom, especially in insects. But yeah, the males' cerci are not both the same length, which is kind of interesting. Finally, the most distinguishing factor for the webspinners is the tarsi on their front legs. This is part of what makes webspinners so cool and interesting. We'll talk about the function of those in just a minute. Finally, the males of this order have wings. The females never have wings, and sometimes the males have wings. And their wings are really cool, and part of their namesake is because they are able to deflate and inflate these wings when they need to, which is really cool. So they do this by pumping hemolymph, which is basically bug blood, through the wings to make them larger for flying, inflate them, or deflate them for crawling in tight spaces. So web spinners are actually quite hard to come across. They're pretty hard to find. They're very small, sort of really good at hiding. But if you ever find a winged one, you know that's going to be a male. So let's get to why web spinners are called web spinners. They are super cool, and that is because web spinners are the only insect that can spin silk through their legs. So I might have mentioned this before on this series, but silk is not unusual in insects. There are many insects that are able to produce silk, and it's usually through the abdomen or through the mouth parts. And when you think of silk, you're probably thinking of like spiders. Obviously, spiders are not insects. So what I'm referring to is, true insects that produce silk, such as the lacewings. Many caterpillars do this to make their cocoons. The larvae of an order called caddisflies, they're able to use the silk from their mouth parts to make little houses for themselves. We'll get to that order later on in the series, but yeah, insect silk is not super rare, but the Embioptera are the only insects that do it with their legs. So yeah, those front legs, they kind of look like boxing gloves, right? That's kind of how I think about it. Those enlarged tarsi, which are basically bug feet, are enlarged for silk glands. So each of those front legs both have silk glands in them. So yes, web spinners live in a highly intricate silken gallery that they make themselves on trees, under leaves, between tree bark. That's where you'll often find them. And some of them even live on live trees, which is kind of cool. So if you ever see like a log or under a rock and you see this thin layer of silk in kind of, worm, serpentine patterns, it might not be a spider. It might actually be some web spinners. So what are the benefits of this? There are actually many benefits to making these highly structured homes. And one of them is that these insects are very soft-bodied. They're not very hardy at all. And so they're very prone to drying out, desiccation, predators, UV radiation, and their young are even more vulnerable to these things. And so they spin these silken galleries to protect themselves. And we know this because there's been some interesting research done where if you remove the silk from these galleries, the insects inside often die just by drying out. So they are reliant on these silk homes. So you might be wondering, what do web spinners eat then if they're always inside of these silken galleries? And the answer is pretty simple. They eat detritus, which is decaying plant matter. They eat fungi, things like that. And another interesting thing is after mating, the female will often eat the male, which is kind of crazy. And if that doesn't happen, he'll often leave and die anyways. This is actually why the males have wings, is to disperse and find other galleries with females inside to mate with. And that's also why their deflating wings are really cool, because they're able to deflate them and make them easier to crawl through these tunnels with. So if you ever find web spinners, they're actually very charismatic and gregarious because they kind of walk in a kind of a funny way, and they're actually very fast. So if you ever find them, number one, they might play dead, which is something that they do, or they might just scuttle away. They might just run away into their tunnels. But what's really cool is they're actually really good at running backwards. So they'll run one way through their tunnel, and then they're able to run just as well backwards, and because they don't have enough space to turn around in the tunnel. So it's pretty funny to see. Again, with many of the other orders we've covered, this order is hemimetabolous, meaning they have a 3-stage incomplete metamorphosis going from egg to nymph to adult. So the silk is also used by the females to protect their young. So she'll lay a clutch of eggs in the silken galleries, and she'll use the silk to protect the eggs, and that means the eggs have a very high success rate compared to other insects. And this is also a form of maternal care. So the mother cares for the young past laying the eggs, which is also very rare in insects. And then once the eggs hatch and the nymphs are born, she will care for the nymphs, oftentimes feeding them through mouth-to-mouth trophallaxis, which is like, think of it kind of like how a mother bird will feed her baby birds. So this is another form of maternal care. So yeah, web spinners are very good mothers, and they are able to use this silk in many stages of her young's development. Another kind of cool thing is that these silken galleries are oftentimes shared by many family units. So if you find one of these galleries and it's really, really large, you might actually have multiple females living in it at once, caring for their young. This is something that we call subsocial. So throughout the series, we've talked about a couple different kinds of sociality in insects. We talked about communal living, which is simply the act of multiple insects living in a given area. We've talked about maternal care, which web spinners also have. So this subsociality is kind of a step below what we usually think of as sociality, which we call eusociality. So that would be what ants do, what termites do, and what honeybees do, where they have this complex society. That's eusociality. Subsociality would be a step below that. So it's not quite as complex as eusociality, but they're still kind of cooperatively living in one environment. But they're not helping each other care for each other's young, which is a key difference. So if you think about it, if these insects spin their silk through their hands, like Spider-Man does, shouldn't he be called Web Spinner Man? Embioptera Man? It just doesn't really roll off the tongue as well as Spider-Man does, but, potato potato. Because if Spider-Man was scientifically accurate, he would be shooting silk out of his... Yeah, I don't think that would really work on TV very well. And with that, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I will see you all next week, where we will talk about Phasmatodea, also known as the stick insects and the leaf insects. If you don't want to miss that, definitely click that subscribe button so you don't miss it. Leave a like and comment something. And with that, I will see you all next week. But until then, keep on bugging. See ya.